States considers itself a global superpower and full of forward thinkers. However, the United States is slowly losing this title as K through 12 public education is not meeting global standards. A study conducted on American 8th graders showed that 7% excelled in mathematics, while in countries such as Singapore and South Korea, those percentages of excelling in advanced mathematics were 47 and 48% respectively. Also, in the most recent study conducted by Pearson, the United States ranked 14th in education, not even in the top 10. In 2012, the United States ranked 17th. So while there was improvement, what's to say the United States won't fall back down into the lower numbers? But why am I talking to you guys about education? You're a university, you must care to some degree about your education. Well, some of you may have kids in the future and send them off to public schools. And also, not to alarm you, but the OECD reported that less than half, 46% of American students finish college. Thusly, the American education system needs to be adapted and reformed to meet up with the modern and more advanced times. First, I'll talk about the problems facing the American education system at the time, right now. Second, I'll talk about how the United States got to this point. And thirdly, I'll talk about some possible solutions. So before I delve too far into some of the problems, how many of you that went to school in Virginia remember the dreaded SOLs? How many of you feel like you actually learned something from the SOLs? How many of you feel like the teacher was just teaching to the test and it wasn't important? Standardized testing is one of the problems facing the American education system. These tests limit the scope on which intelligence is based because it's looking for a predetermined answer by a course instructor. Also, because of this test, teachers end up teaching to the test, which offers a very narrow curriculum and doesn't allow for more in-depth research into the topic. These tests also do not take into account creativity or other forms of expression which cannot be demonstrated by an A, B, C, or D answer. Therefore, it's not an accurate representation of intellectual capacity of students. And also, these tests aren't shown to make students more knowledgeable, as they may take in the information long enough to pass the test and then it's gone. Also, as students get older, they seem not to care as much about these tests because they realize that it doesn't affect their grade in the class, so they shrug it off. Next is another problem with public education. Most high schools start around 7 a.m., and that's actually a problem. I mean, not just because people don't like getting up early. The National Sleep Foundation reported, according to the National Sleep Foundation, adolescents require as much sleep as they did when they were children. This equates to about 8 to 9.5 hours per night. Also, the National Sleep Foundation said that most adolescents' natural bedtime falls around 11 p.m. This also does not take into account extracurriculars or homework the student may have to do. The natural bedtime is caused by changes in the body affected by puberty. And not getting this amount of sleep can impair daytime functioning of students, so they can't function in classes when they haven't even fully woken up or they're still recovering from not getting the required amount of sleep. Next, the system of core education at this point is detrimental to learning. The core system, for those of you who don't know, is focusing on 4 subjects primarily, of English, math, social studies, and science. While it is good to focus on these topics, it doesn't allow for more well-rounded students in topics such as foreign languages or arts or physical education or other topics. Also, this prevents students from having intellectual freedom as they can't learn about what truly interests them. But how did the United States get to this point? Well, the the No Child Left Behind Act is partially to blame. This is what caused the standardized testing craze in the United States. The test that the No Child Left Behind Act requires primarily focus on math and reading. So even with the focus on core subjects taught in school, these tests leave a lot to be desired in topics such as science and social studies and other subjects. This standard on a nationwide basis also causes the United States to have a one-size-fits-all approach, which may allow for material to be dumbed down or for those students who don't excel in a certain subject to be doomed to a cycle of failure. So what are some possible solutions? 1, eliminate standardized testing. Also, you could reform the Common Core and either reform or eliminate the Common Core. If we are going to reform it, we need to allow for more topics. And finally, support groups like the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development, or the ASCD, because they're working to help reform the public education system so the future generation can receive a quality education. And so I hope you realize now how severe the education reform is, and that this copy and paste method of education is not sufficient to our society. Thank you.